Welcome to the Amherst Planning Board meeting, Wednesday, October 30th, 2019, 7 p.m., Town Room, Town Hall. So we have minutes, but we don't have minutes to do, right? Okay, great. Public comment period, this is kind of a special meeting, but if there's someone here who would like to speak to the planning board about a topic that's not on the agenda tonight, please raise your hand. Okay, I see no one. So we'll move on to item 3, public meeting, subdivision. It says 7 o'clock, so it's 7:05. Amherst Hill subdivision, sub 1989-13, request by residents of Amherst Hill subdivision that the planning board rescind the release of lots that were released by the planning board on May 1st, 2019, from the approval of the covenant contracted dated July 2nd, 2003, recorded in the Hampshire County Registry of Deeds, Book 7555, page 61. So we have 2 guests, and Chrysalis. So I'll just say that we did have a site visit for the planning board. Chris, should we let them talk first, or should we talk about our site visit first? Okay, great. So, thank you. Introduce yourselves and
take it away.
Take it away.
Sure.
Yep.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, members of the board. I'm Tom Reedy, an attorney with Bacon Wilson here in Amherst, here on behalf of Amherst Hills. With me this evening, Jim Master-Alexis, also an attorney and a resident over at Amherst Hills. And I think maybe to just really distill it down, what we're looking for this evening is for the planning board to rescind approval of 9 of the lots that they had released back in May. May 1st, you had released 13 lots. Since then, 4 have been sold, and so we wouldn't want the rescission to affect those 4 lots. But the balance of the 9, we would ask for the planning board to rescind the release and request that Tofino Associates come in with justifiable documents suggesting what the cost to finish the roadway, to fix and to finish the roadway, and then for you to increase that performance bond to reach that amount. And I think as simple as we can make it, that's what we're looking for. If you were out there, you saw the condition of the roadway. I think that there's plenty of paper in front of you, and I just don't want to get mired down in it, because I think at the end of the day, it's that simple, is that we think you made a decision back in May, maybe not on all the information, and we're hoping that with the information you will rescind as it relates to those 9 lots, just so that the residents and the town can see performance as everybody had expected. I know that you had received an email from Ms. Brestrup suggesting a couple of different alternatives, and we would just suggest that the rescission is the best alternative, because if you do nothing tonight, there is nothing preventing Tofino from conveying those 9 lots. And if they don't own those lots, I don't know that you could, in the future, if Tofino walked away, rescind and have any leverage to get an increased performance bond or collateral in the form of those lots. And I think if that's the case, you could play out the scenario where if you say, okay, we're not going to do anything, but we're not going to issue building permits, for example. Tofino could find a developer who says, well, we'll buy those lots for $50,000 because instead of $140,000, which is what they're going for, at some point in the future, we will have a road finished there. So Tofino sells them, and they don't increase the performance bond. The road never gets finished, and then it's on the residents or the town to try to figure out how to finish that roadway. So it's the fear that if nothing is done tonight, Tofino would divest themselves of those lots that you have released, and you would have no recourse to make them increase their performance bond or to hold those lots as collateral. So we would request that you do rescind the release, have them increase their performance bond, and then have them actually do the work.
Anything else?
Well, I don't want to belabor that. And I just want to say, I am an attorney. Don't hold that against me here, okay? But yes, appreciate that. you know, I am an attorney, and, but I'm here as a resident and a person that's tried to coordinate this response. So Mr. Reedy is our attorney, and I just want to state that for the record. And the first thing is, I hope you had a nice walk through our neighborhood, okay? It's a beautiful neighborhood, and we're having some problems with the roads, okay? This isn't just a private land dispute, okay? This is an important case because we're in a situation here where the roads are half-built, there's only the base layer of road. And if there isn't proper security and the lots are rescinded or something done so that the work as called for in the covenant and in the three-party agreement, which is typically called the three-party agreement here, but it's actually called the performance secured by lenders agreement. We call it the three-party agreement. It's clear that the work wasn't done here on June 30th, 2019. None of us have had anything to do with the construction of the road at all and had no idea until September 6th, not even 2 months ago, that Tofino was taking, in my opinion, the tortured position, unreasonable position that we had some sort of financial responsibility for this road when the road was only half constructed. So if that's the case, and developers can build half their road, not even complete the road, and then turn the cost over to the citizens that live there, and then continue to sell lots in the subdivision, that sets a really bad precedent, okay? And I can tell you that there's a reason why Tofino has acted as the association for 14 years. The association makes decisions on lot lines, where things are placed, and Tofino wanted that control. That's fine, okay? But in my document that I don't expect you to have read because I sent it at about 6 o'clock tonight, so basically what I'm saying here is they knew there was an association. It's in the purchase and sale agreements as recently as 2019 of some of the neighbors sitting behind me. In 2019, he said the association is not active and will be active sometime in the foreseeable future. But for 14 years, they were in charge of this road. For 14 years, the deterioration occurred, all right? So I think I'm just asking you to stay in your lane here. And I think, with all due respect, look at the covenant. If you don't think the work was done on the ground by the time you signed this document on May 1st, this document right here, the certificate of performance, if the work wasn't done and you released the lots, I think that was an honest mistake, okay? If you don't think the work was done, and it's not, I can tell you, I mean, I'm not the town engineer, he's sitting behind me. The work wasn't done by June 30th, it would be really helpful in this situation to increase the security, because $288,000 and change is not nearly enough. And I can tell you, in some of my conversations with Mr. Parker, they believe this security is only for the top coat. They don't think it covers the bottom coat. I think they're wrong, okay? And I think we need to be clear that the security is for the entire project, because that's why the subdivision control. That's why the subdivision control, that's part of what planning boards do. So with that, I won't belabor the point, but I think that we're here, we're here, he's not. We're testifying. We're here looking at you in the eye, telling you this is this real truth. I think you should take, I'm going to put my lawyer hat on here, but I'm not a lawyer in this case. I think you should take an adverse inference for that. We're here, there are people sitting behind me. How many people are here from Amherst Hills? Please raise your hand. We're here. We have 8 physicians that save lives. We have 7 people in the neighborhood that are at the top of the, I don't want to say command structure like it's an army, the top of the command structure at UMass, the largest employer in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We have people here that are professors and scientists, okay? We have a comedy writer for The Simpsons, okay? That's the truth, okay? But we have a lot of good professional people that are honest and hardworking. And if we had read this and we had said, this is on us, okay, we knew what we were buying into, that is not the case, okay? And if we have obligations and we satisfy them, okay? And that's not what that is not what's happening here, all right? We satisfy our obligations. We have covenants. Tofino has covenants. They haven't followed them. That's all we're asking you to do. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Would you like to hear from the town engineer about the condition of the roads?
That would be great.
Yeah. I'd
Thank
actually
you.
like to hear that, too. I'd like to see what you heard, what he says. That would be good. Should we move?
Yes, if you don't mind going back. And
No, that's okay.
then,
That's okay.
and if
Hello?
you could, hello, if you
Jason
could,
Skeels, town engineer.
right, welcome.
So I'm not exactly sure where to start. I didn't really prepare anything. I guess brief history of the road, kind of.
That,
Construct.
and a little bit about, we were hearing the road is half done, but there's actually more that goes into a road than just the base and the top. Maybe if you could just give a little description to what else is under the road and in the road.
Okay. So I'll start with Jeffrey Flowers began this subdivision somewhere in the 80s. I'm not going to name any specific dates. I think he went bankrupt. I'm not exactly sure the details of that, but let it sit. It was manholes sitting in the woods. Then Tofino Associates purchased the property, and since it was already an approved subdivision, began work relatively soon after purchase, and started building the road, putting in the infrastructure. Some of the infrastructure was already there. We approved it based on its condition. We had everything surveyed and cameraed and
When you say
inspected.
infrastructure, what do you mean?
Oh, so infrastructure is in drain pipes, drain manholes, catch basins, water mains, sewer mains, the detention ponds and whatnot. So some of that was already installed, but had been overgrown in the woods after it sat for 15 or so years. So some of that got reused, others were removed, disposed of, and then new infrastructure went in, new drainage, sewer, water drain, and roadways and detention ponds. So that was around 2004-ish. And then once all the infrastructure was in and approved, as far as we test the water mains, the sewer mains for pressure and leaks and everything else, that was all approved. Then they started putting down the binder course of asphalt so that they could start releasing lots. And they did a small portion, the two roads in they did, and a connection between the two was the initial binder course that was paved. Then as they sold more and more of those lots on the paved sections, they finally decided to finish the full loop all the way around and paved that, and that was probably 7 years later. So roughly 2005, the first asphalt went down, then 2000, actually it was more like 2015, the second section got paved, so that's relatively newer. And then what was, so then it sat for quite a while. So the original asphalt, the binder course has sat for close to 15 years now. And it's not really intended to sit that long, so it has degraded considerably. It's kind of porous, so water gets in there and it deteriorates if it sits too long. So that's sort of the story of, there's also, the detention ponds are where all the stormwater drainage goes. They're sort of off-road, set aside in the woods, and those have kind of become extremely overgrown and have not been maintained the way they should be. They should be mowed at least once a year, and at this point there's woody shrubs, a couple inches in diameter growing in some spots, so another piece that hasn't really been maintained the way it should. And what was the second part of your question as far as infrastructure?
Well, that
I
was
think
it,
I
just
covered-
explaining what makes up a
Okay.
road. So you're saying that the infrastructure, all that went in, graded, and then the base coat.
Right.
And so the finish is to put the top coat on.
Right.
If you could sort of detail where it's at now and what makes it a finished road.
Okay, so right now it's all binder course. Typically, if it was fresh binder course, you could just come in, pave 1.5 inches of top coat that kind of seals everything up. You'd have to raise all the structures, all the catch basins, manholes, water gates. They have to come up to finish grade. They raise them about 1.5 inches, and then they come in and pave the top course. But that's assuming you have a good foundation. And right now, a lot of that older pavement is failing. And if you were to pave it, the cracks that you see now would just reflect right through to the top. So in our punch list, we're recommending a couple different treatments for how to deal with this. Some is just remove the binder course altogether and put a new binder course back. Others are attempts to sort of save what's there and add a little more thickness to sort of seal everything up, and that should hold. So that's part of the recommendations in my punch list from September.
So there's maintaining the road, and then there's finishing the road. So
Right.
you were just talking about finishing the road. In Amherst, in a subdivision, when does a neighborhood usually get finished?
Oh, right. So typically we wait for about 90% of the lots to be built and developed, because the construction equipment that brings the concrete and and grades the lots can be kind of detrimental to the top coat of asphalt. So typically we wait till it's about 90% built out, and then they come in and put the top coat down. This particular subdivision suffered through a recession and sort of languished for a little while before it sort of picked up again. So we have asked a couple of times if they could do partial finishes. If one road was 90% built out, we've requested that they put the top course down, but they sort of wanted to stick with doing it all at once. So.
So in the performance agreement from 2017, there was a date put in it of June 30th of this year. Was that a firm date? Did you actually expect it? The neighborhood was or in construction, does that usually, it's not a firm date?
It's not always a firm date.
Yeah,
I don't know. It wasn't necessarily in my mind a rock solid firm date.
I just know in
would have been-
construction,
Right. It
right.
would have been better off had it been paved sooner. The longer that binder course sits, the worse, the more it's going to deteriorate. So every winter that binder course stays exposed, there's going to be a little less binder every spring, because the plows will just scrape it down and eventually you won't have much of anything left.
Yeah, well, you speak for, no, I was going to say, should I open it up for questions from the board to Jason, or go back, or do we do the site visit? What order do you think we should do this?
I think you should do the site visit. That would be good. And then
And
open it
Jason.
up to questions from the board to Jason.
Okay. So we did have a site visit with you. If we could have a show of hands who was there, so everyone can see. Okay. So would one of the members like to give a summary? And if there's any part you're not sure of, you have the town engineer you can ask here too. Thank you.
I'll take a flyer at this. We met at the bottom of Hawthorne Drive and Station Road, walked up the hill to the subdivision and walked around to the left for two-thirds of the length of that road, and observed a variety of qualities of the asphalt paving. At the lower end, it was significantly degraded. At the upper side of the hillside going up from Station Road, it was in slightly better condition. There was significant evidence of potholes being recently repaired. And when I left, I went out the other way, and I discovered that there was a very long stretch of new pavement there, and I guess that's in Belchertown, although I'm not exactly sure where that is, which is clearly not our responsibility, but that had also been heavily repaved, suggesting that the pavement there was really treacherous some time ago. We also observed a number of deteriorated catch basins and other structures which looked to be both degraded and even dangerous in some cases. And that's basically, I think, the result of the visit.
Sure. Janet?
So we also saw that some drainage easements that were not cleared, which would give the town access to drainage basins, is that right? Detention basins, and we saw that the pedestrian trails and easements were not open. They just had trees, and they were just full of trees. We saw some houses that had water from the roofs draining directly onto sidewalks. We saw a lot of recently filled potholes. The two detention ponds we looked at were overgrown with shrubs and small trees, and looked like no one had cleared them really in years, ever, whatever. And I'm trying to think of anything else.
Chris?
I just wanted to note that, in my estimation, Mr. Skills pointed out about half of Hawthorne Road needed to be brought down to take away the base course and replace it. And it looked like maybe a third of Linden Ridge Road needed to have that same treatment, but the other parts of the base course seem to be in reasonable shape. So I'm wondering if Mr. Skills agrees with that assessment.
Yes, yeah, pretty much.
Actually, could I add to that, that when you were there, you were talking about work that had been started, like what we were talking about, potholes being filled, but you also talked about these epoxies or asphalt add-ons that are going to go around, especially the catch basins, because that was the whole problem of why the plows would have a problem.
Right.
So if you could talk about the work that's been done and the work that you anticipate to be done in the next few weeks.
Right, so we have spoken with Tofino Associates. They did do the pothole patches. That was their first effort. They've contracted with another company that specializes in it's called an asphalt mastic. It's kind of like a liquefied asphalt. Because we talked to Tofino that we can't plow up there because it will damage the town plows. We have been plowing as a courtesy, even though it's still a private road. We do that in many locations, so we try to provide that courtesy if possible, but when it damages our plows, we need the owner to address the issues or they're on the hook for plowing. So there's a company that's gonna come in and put mastic around all the manhole covers that protrude up and catch plows. I've spoken with that vendor and he is scheduled to come in. I didn't get an exact date, but they are coming in. I also spoke with Tofino about the two collapsing catch basins that have the barrels, the traffic barrels on them. And he said he has contracted with Bradway Construction to repair those. And the new slab tops are on order or under construction, basically at a concrete plant. And as soon as they're in, they plan to come up, remove the failing tops, the asphalt and the top, and then put the new top on and pave that back into place. So those are the three things we asked of him prior, in order to allow the town to plow without damaging equipment. And it sounds like one of those three things has been done, and the other two sound like they've been scheduled. I can't speak. I won't say that it's definitely going to happen because I didn't schedule it myself. So it does sound like it's going to happen.
But it sounds like in 2 to 3 weeks.
Yeah, in the next couple of weeks.
And if they did happen, would the DPW sign off then for plowing?
Yes, we would probably just do a drive-through with one of my plow drivers and make sure everything was decent, and we would continue to plow and salt.
And then the other things have to do with preparing the road for the top coat, which also means
Right.
preparing the road to be accepted by the town.
Correct. Yeah, that's the remainder of my 3-page punch list.
Okay. And some of those things are included in the estimate that was done previous that had to do with the 2017 performance agreement that had the approximately $288,000.
Right. So the agreement, so I had an initial estimate that was much larger, which included the currently undeveloped cul-de-sac. The sidewalks hadn't been plowed yet. There were several other things that hadn't been done. Tofino went and completed a couple of those things, said he was going to take care of a lot of the other minor things, and then said, let's agree to just make this the cost of the top coat. placing the top coat, which includes raising structures, some ramps here and there, some sidewalk touch-ups, but none of the, only a few of the minor items got taken care of at that point. And so that cost would only cover the cost of placing the top coat and raising the structures, basically, from my original estimate. And that estimate was, the original estimate was 2013, and it took a few years for them to come back with that third-party agreement. So it was estimated for a little bit of inflation, but not much
It
else.
was like 20%, I think.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Did you have a question?
Yeah, I do.
Michael and then Janet.
This may be an unfair question, but can you estimate the average lifespan of a first coat without a top coat on top of it?
That's tough. There's a ton of variables, but I wouldn't, the only time we ever do that, we only let it overwinter a year at the most on any town roads. And that's just sometimes to split costs, sometimes have adverse weather that kills your construction season. So we have let them sit 1 year, but the maximum I'd ever want to see it sit is probably 5 years, honestly. It gets far too degraded because it's porous.
And when was the first base coat put on?
So I believe it was 2005 for the first couple of legs of the road, and then a second portion, the continuous loop was completed probably 2015, and that is still in pretty good shape.
So the first course is clearly over its expected lifespan, and the
Right.
second course is nearing its completed lifespan at best.
Correct.
Janet?
So when this agreement, the performance agreement was signed in 2017, did you observe that the base coat needed to be ground up and replaced by grinding up?
It was still in relatively good shape at that point. There's sort of it's a very sharp curve. Once it starts to fail, it really starts to fail. So it's not exactly obvious until everything, they have these asphalt deterioration curves, and they go down slowly, and then when they hit the end, it's near vertical. And so I think we're nearing that vertical part of the line on the deterioration graph, because it really goes downhill fast.
Another question I had was, actually, no, wait, sorry.
Jack?
So I was not at the site visit, and I listened to the video, so I'm able to vote. But I drove through the neighborhood, and my first impression was, this is in better condition than where I live, on Mount Holyoke Drive. So hearing the age and the aging and all that is extremely informative. And so I think Mike was trying to get, like, how long is this fix going to last? And it doesn't sound much beyond, this winter season. Yeah. So
it's a balance. So in subdivisions, very often it takes years and years to get to that 90% build out so that the top coat goes on so the town can accept the road, because the town doesn't want to accept a finished road too early, because then if half of it still has to be built out with construction, it could ruin the integrity of the road. But in this case, it's gone on for a really long time, and there was an attempt to try to get it done this year, but have put some pressure on Tofino that he'd do it sooner rather than later, and I do believe at the site visit you said that he was suggesting that he does it by next spring.
Right. He mentioned that he was planning on doing it in spring of 2020.
He did.
Placing the top coat. I don't know how much of the punch list he's looked over yet, or if he's put any costs to any of the items on there yet, but he did say he was interested in placing the top coat next spring.
I did, Chris, I think, did we see an email where he thought his rough was like 50 to 100,000 or something, right? But this is all, so the request to you was, would you do a cost estimate?
Yeah, I can put together a cost estimate. I haven't yet, but I could. I would base it on the Mass DOT has a running average that all the bids that they open across the state, basically, and they have the itemized, asphalt, sidewalk, catch basin, they have itemized prices that they average for, 2019. So I would base it on that. It's typically ends up a little higher than what we pay in Western Mass because it's averaged across the state. But it's gives it a safe buffer, actually, so.
So you would create that estimate, and Tofino would look at it, and this is what would impact increasing the performance agreement or getting a new one and
Right.
adjusting dates.
Yes.
Janet, did I see your hand? Yeah.
So you've had conversations with Ted Parker over the years about, things on your punch list, what has to be
Right.
done.
Every winter, we talk to him about prepping it for winter plowing, and every year we say, you can do some of this, or you could do, some portions of this could be topped. You should think about that before it gets worse, and, so we've gone through it a couple of times in a row.
So at any point in those years or recently, has Mr. Parker said to you, we'll talk to the homeowners association to get the base coat replaced, to fill a pothole, to fix the catch basin? Did he ever say that?
No.
Did he say that
There's always been
Tofino
good
would do
faith-
it?
There's always been good faith efforts, and he's always made the effort, and it's never been, there's never been any of this sort of adversarial, it's always, he's, sometimes we have to push a little harder, but he's always made good on what he said he was gonna do, so we've always proceeded on good faith that he was gonna honor his part of the agreement, basically.
I saw Jack first.
I don't want to put you on the spot, and I don't want to apologize to the Amherst Hills folks for not even knowing that this came up, and I guess that's a procedural thing. I mean, it seems ironic that for a notice of intent, that all the abutters get notices here, and when these lots release, there's not a mechanism for notification of the residents.
So this time, for this particular meeting, we did notify all the residents. All the property owners who own property in Amherst Hills received a written notification in the mail, and we did send one to the Greenfield Savings Bank and to Tofino Associates. So that was part of the recommendation of Joel Bard when he wrote that initial email to you on October 16th. So that's why it's good that you didn't make a decision that night and you held it over till today. And now you're having the meeting with as many residents as could manage to show up tonight, but they were all notified.
They were notified when?
I think they were notified last week. I think we sent the,
I'm referring to May.
May, we
Yeah.
don't send out notifications
Yeah.
for
And then-
lot releases.
Yeah, then we
That's
could've-
not typical.
We could have caught that. So that's all I'm saying. It's just like, boy, if we could fix that procedure, that seems really important, so this doesn't happen again. But you did not, we went by your 2017 letter because, why? That's why I'm confused.
I don't know that I was ever asked about it. I do see the agendas. I don't always pay close scrutiny to all the agendas. And I think part of it was, since we have been on sort of a good faith effort, we were thinking that, okay, if he releases I didn't specifically know about the May release, but I presume that releasing more lots gets us closer to finishing, gets the developer the money he needs to finish. So, we presume that it's all going towards, the completion of this project, and that's ideally what I think everybody wants, is this to be finished and taken over.
Chris?
So I think the question we usually ask is the road in such shape that it will allow access to the site and allow a home to be built on the site? We don't usually ask specifically about the condition of the road. So if equipment can get to the site and people can build a house on the site, that's usually what we're looking for at that point.
Right, and it was still passable.
Yeah, for the record, Chris, was Mr. Parker notified of this meeting and he chose not to come? And what is the situation relative to that question?
Yeah.
He was notified as a property owner, and I also notified him personally. I had a conversation with him last night, and he also sent an email, which you all got a copy of, and he stated in the email that he wasn't planning to come tonight.
So the residents, one of the things they're asking about is the performance agreement, which is like insurance. It's just to cover the costs so that if in the unfortunate situation, the developer goes bankrupt or runs away and leaves the country or whatever, that there are funds there to finish the road. So to further that process and update the existing performance agreement, how long would you need to do that cost estimate that you were talking about?
I could probably polish it up in about a week between my other responsibilities. It wouldn't be 40 hours worth of work, but it would be, here and there.
So you do that, do you have to go over it with the developer? Because then it starts this three-party agreement, right? So an amount is agreed upon that's exceeds the amount of the $288,000, and he would then have to enter negotiation with his bank, Greenfield Bank, to create a
Right.
new performance agreement or
Either that
an addendum?
Or we ask for more security on any remaining lots, or I don't, that part I'm not usually involved in.
Yeah, what
I-
part of the town does deal with that? So you do
I
your
would do
part,
the
then
estimate,
what?
and then, yeah.
And then,
Cheerfully back away.
I think last time the chair of the planning board signed, Steve Schreiber signed the three-party agreement for the town.
no, well, who who in the town is the town representative in that three-party agreement to make a new one happen, or
I believe it was the planning board last time. I can check.
well,
I think I know what you're asking.
yeah, we sign off on it. It comes to us, it came to us, so back in May of 2017, and it's presented to us that this is a three-party agreement, but it's already like all written up and done, and it's explained to us, and then we vote on it. But how does it get from a cost estimate to,
I know I share
a
my cost
three-party
estimate with
agreement on our
Tofino
desk?
And planning, and then I think he came back with a sort of a, I think we met and discussed what, Ted, what Tofino was gonna do to take some of that off of the list. One of the big things was he had to complete the sidewalk around the entire subdivision, and that was a relatively big cost. It did knock the estimate down quite a bit. I think my original estimate was somewhere around 600,000, and so he did a considerable portion of the work to knock it down to what to that 288,000 mark.
I think the estimate was like 238 or something.
My
and then
original
you
was
had the
238, and then
the
it
contingency.
lingered for a couple of years, so we inflated it by 20%.
So if
that
you-
was sort of internal.
So I'm just
town
thinking
staff and the developer.
process. How
Right.
long, so I don't know if there's a time limit that then you put on, so you do a new cost estimate, and then what is the timeline that we could expect that Tofino would come back with his bank to the town with a new third-party agreement?
I think this might be part of the discussion, but I'm not sure that we need a new third-party agreement, because there's a clause in here that lets us raise the amount. So it's not-
Right. I
yeah.
mean, alter or anew, whatever.
Yeah. So
Whatever is.
that might be a question for town council, but I think
Yeah.
we don't have to renegotiate this agreement from,
But that's what I'm saying, it needs to be, an amount has to be, so a cost estimate happens, and then a new document still has to be created to come to us. So I'm saying, how long would that take to go from cost estimate to it coming to us to sign a new or adjusted performance agreement?
I would say it depends on if Tofino agrees to do this.
Okay.
And what happened last time is that Tofino drafted the agreement, and we sent it to our town council at
Okay.
Copeland and Page.
Yep.
And they reviewed it and redlined it, and then it came back to us, and we sent it back to Tofino. So it's sort of a back and forth thing.
That's what I was
And
guessing.
they
Great.
were actually promoting this last time. Tofino was promoting this, so they had an incentive to get it done and get it signed. If you're asking them for an increase in the amount to put aside, they may not be as eager to get it
Right.
done and get it signed. So there may be some leverage that you want to take to, get them to do this, which could be not giving permits or rescinding the release of lots. So those were some of the options that I outlined in
Right.
my email to you.
So to make it, to increase the initiative for him to get this agreement updated, which this is part of standard construction practice to, because it says quite clearly that it has to meet or exceed the current estimate of the work. Is it ever, should we ask him if he wants the option to hire a third party to do the cost estimate? Because I know what the town engineer is saying, this is not, you're going to use Mass DOT general standards, and he which might bring it in higher, like you said, which could concern him, but he could have the option to hire his own cost estimator to come up, which of course then you would look at it and
Right.
whatever. But is that another option that would be asked of Tofino?
Yes, as a matter of fact, that was one of the things that came forward in the letter that you recently received from Mark Tanner of Bacon and Wilson. He suggested that Tofino should come up with an estimate, and then that estimate should be checked by our town engineer.
Okay. And who asks, is that you, or who follows up with him on that?
Tofino? I don't know. I guess I could.
If you choose to go that route, then staff would make that request of Tofino, and if Tofino didn't want to do it, then we would ask Jason to do it.
So we have quite a few things in play here right now. We have work that's been done and work that's ongoing that hopefully will be done in a few weeks. We have a cost estimate that you might be creating, or a third party would be creating. And then hopefully the ball gets rolling on updating the performance agreement. Am I missing anything? So I think we need I feel a little time there's things in the fire right now that are moving ahead. I don't know, does anyone else have any outstanding issues that they need clarification about right now? Jack?
Well, it's not an issue, it's just an observation. And again, the longevity of the fix that's happening or is going to happen sort of brings it into compliance, but it's compliance for the purposes of,
Plowing.
yeah, plowing and that. But it's not going to last long. I'm usually when something is out of compliance and you get back in, you're kind of good to go, but it's more staying on top of the individual and how that happens. So, those are, my thoughts with regard to doing the rescinding but I do like the idea of getting the bond to where it should be.
Go ahead, you have a question?
I don't understand what you mean, like, that's where you were on the rescinding. Can you clarify that?
Oh, well, say the things that were happening in the last few weeks were completed in April. I given there's been a lot of pain and frustration, at that time, I don't know that we would have, come up with anything that would say we're not going to release these lots. Now we're aware that the conditions were not as they should have been at the time that he was provided these things. So you say he is out of compliance. Now he's doing some short-term fixes, and so for me, rescinding the lots, it makes it a little more difficult to go back in time when he was wrong, but he's fixed it now, and then predicting what he's going to do in the future or not, sort of thing. So that's my difficulty in evaluating the situation.
So with an updated performance agreement, a new date would be set for completion. And at this point, he's saying spring,
Correct.
but that would get it in writing. And I think he's understanding, and everybody's sort of learning that on that, the failing base coat, so when we looked at this in May, we went on the information from 2017, and the truth is, usually a road doesn't degrade that quickly in 2 years, and that's pretty recent and fresh, but it's getting to a point where some of it is failing, and that's why you've identified areas that have to be remilled and cut out and redone, which will up the estimate that will be added to the performance agreement.
Right.
Okay. Chris?
So I've been speaking a lot with the town engineer about this, and he has experience developing subdivisions. And one thing he suggested, which you may not want to do tonight, but at some point, is to raise the level of the performance agreement and make it clear that you want Tofino to do the work. And then, given the fact that we're faced with people saying that there's no homeowners association, that whole thing about the homeowners association is murky to me.
Yeah.
Tofino, on the one hand, says, yes, it exists. It's existed ever since the first person bought a lot, but at the same time, he told Bercume that it doesn't exist, and the homeowners think it doesn't exist. So I think, at some point, Tofino could go to the homeowners association and try to make an arrangement with them, negotiation or whatever, to say, all right, we'll pay for part of the repair to bring this up to grade, and you pay for part of the repair. And you'll be assessed a certain amount per property or per square footage or whatever it is. But that wouldn't come about until you requested that they increase the amount of the money put aside to fix the road. And in order to have the leverage to do that, you need to do something. You need to either rescind the release of the lots or say that you're going to recommend to town staff not to issue permits on the properties that have not yet been sold. So, okay, so that's my statement. But I also want to point out to you that you recently received a 68-page document from Bacon Wilson this afternoon. You also received an email from me this afternoon, and you received something from Mr. Mastralexis this afternoon. So, and you've heard from Mr. Skills for the first time really in public today. So in my mind, I think you need some time to absorb all of this, and staff needs time to kind of figure it all out, and we need time, if Mr. Skills is going to do this cost estimate, to have him do it. And eventually I think he's going to have to do a cost estimate anyway, even if we get Tofino to do it. because Mr. Skeels is going to have to review it, so in my mind, why doesn't he just go ahead and do it, and then Tofino can dispute it, So
Agree.
let's get the ball rolling.
Or meet in the
and-
middle, yeah.
Yeah, or meet in the middle. Let's get the ball rolling, ask Mr. Skeels to do the cost estimate for the work that remains to be done, and then, pursue the idea of either rescinding the lot releases or withholding the permits, but not do it tonight, because you just received all of this information, and I think it would be kind of a precipitous action to do it tonight.
So if we take a little time, our next meeting is in a week. I don't think a whole lot, that's tight, but our next meeting is the 20th?
The 20th of November is
Could
your
we
next
put it-
meeting that is not full of, doesn't have a full agenda.
Could we put it on, that would be open to put it there? And then- Okay, great. Janet?
Chris, in your conversations with Tofino, have they indicated that they would agree to a higher performance bond, that would be acceptable, or have you discussed that at all?
They've seen all the material that's been going back and forth. They didn't comment on whether they would be interested in having that as an option, but they did state that they own 15 of the lots in the subdivision, so they're willing to contribute, whatever that means, to fixing the road so that it can be paved, but they're contending that they would want the residents to contribute also. So, in my mind, there's perhaps some conversation that could occur in the next 2 weeks between Tofino's lawyers and the lawyers for the residents, see if they can reach any agreement. I don't think that the amount of the increase in the performance bond is that great. We've been sort of tossing around a number like $100,000, or is it much more than that? So that may be low, maybe it's 200 or 300, who knows? But we don't have that information yet, so Mr.
Right.
Parker can't really react to anything yet.
No.
So it seems like there's a lot of information that is not available to us tonight. And to take an action like is being requested, I think it would be too soon. I also think, you've been told by Joel Bard to make factual findings if you choose to go one of these routes. If you choose to go the route of rescinding the release of the lots, or if you choose to recommend to town staff that they not issue any permits for the lots. So, we staff would like an opportunity to put together some factual findings for your review, and that could occur on November 20th. So I think, given all of this, that it's just not, the facts haven't really gelled yet. The whole picture hasn't really gelled enough for me to say you should go ahead and take one of these actions tonight. But you're the board, and you do what you think is correct.
Mr. Reedy, do you have anything to add about ongoing negotiations or?
Yeah, and I don't know that that even needs to be within the purview of the planning board. I think our concern is if there is no action taken tonight, what is to prevent Tofino from conveying those lots immediately? And when you look at the balance of the harms, what harm would they suffer by rescinding that release and using the facts that the town engineer presented this evening, plus the facts that you witnessed when you were out there, that the road, in my sense from what Mr. Jemzik said, is if these facts were known on or before May 1st, that release would not have happened. And if that's the case, why not rescind that release, incentivize Tofino to negotiate that performance bond? Because right now, if nothing happens, they can go and convey those lots, and the third party, you may not be able to rescind at that point. And if Tofino doesn't agree to whatever $200,000 or $300,000 increase of the performance bond, and they say, we're just going to walk away, who's harmed here? And it's the residents of Amherst Hills. And so while I can appreciate wanting to take a step back, see if anything percolates, comes to the surface, and there's an easier way out, there could be irreparable harm if nothing is done. And so that would be our concern. And I think, I'm not very forceful with these things, but this is something that there is nothing to prevent Tofino from going in a direction that really takes away any leverage that the town would have. There's nothing, as I see it, compelling them to negotiate a higher performance bond. And there's nothing compelling them to perform on the work. I mean, that's probably a private right,
So we heard you say that earlier.
Thank you.
And we hear that. What I'm wondering is, I only quickly got to read Mr. Master Alexis's email that came out, but, item 1 I could see is, that regarding the performance agreement and the original agreements. But then as it stepped into issues 2, 3, and 4, they're so classic. They're a dispute between the residents
Certainly.
and the developer. And what we're asking is that an ongoing effort that lawyers will be and communications will happen to try to find compromise in this? And a better delineated, like, who wants what and what needs to be done.
I mean, it seems pretty clear that Tofino is taking the position that the homeowners association is responsible for the cost of all of this.
This is, of course, that's his side and your side.
Sure.
And we don't have him here. I'm just saying, like,
I don't know that there is a middle
So-
ground.
some of that part is not, we can't,
No.
so you're asking us to rescind a decision we made to help your side get leverage against the other side.
It wasn't leverage
But-
for us.
So I still aren't sure, like, the conveying, I don't, this is just an adjustment in the playout. In some ways, the conveying and the selling of the lots gets the neighborhood closer to completion so that the end and the road can be finished and the town can accept the road and move on.
But who's gonna pay for
The town
that
still
road?
has leverage of withholding the building permits, as Ms. Bestrup was saying, that, the leverage that we're looking at is to say you can't get any building
But,
permits.
so just play
That's
that
a-
out, if you would, right? So Tofino conveys to
Yeah.
Party X. Party X
Yeah.
has no idea that the town is going to withhold a building permit. Party X then goes and says, I want a building permit, and you say, no, you can't have
Yeah.
a building permit.
But now we've stepped into legal issues again. It would be unlawful to sell lots that can't be built on. That just doesn't
But
sound
there's,
legal.
as of today, and so that's, I guess, why we're saying something needs to be done, because as of tonight,
Yeah.
there is no prohibition of Tofino on issuance of any building permit from the town. So tomorrow, he could go in good faith and say, there is no prohibition. You can buy it, I'll sell it to you for $50,000. He takes it and goes.
It's true. So now you've just said something, and then, Jack, you're not, so we're thinking of the 20th. We want to get more information and digest this and read, and we've set something for 3 weeks away. I don't know. I mean, we'll see how this sits with the board. Janet? And
Can we take some time as the board and discuss this? Because I feel like you were talking about 3 weeks from now, and I think, I don't want to get into the dispute between the homeowners association and the homeowners and then Tofino, but I think that we have an obligation and we have powers under the subdivision control law, and I'd like to talk to the members and ask them, like, if you knew then, back in April, was it? What you know now, would the board have released the lots? Would it have increased the amount of performance? And if the answer is no, we wouldn't have released the lots, and yes, we would have had a much higher performance bond and different discussions, then I think we're well within our rights. I think we should talk about that. I wasn't part of the board, but to me, it seems that, how do we get to a subdivision that's safe, that has stormwater controls, that has clear retention basins, that has easements that are being honored? How do we get to that spot? And we have the power to make decisions that enforce that, right? I mean, I don't want to wade into this dispute between these two people who, how they're going to allocate the funds, but we have the power to say to Tofino, you have to here's your punch list, you have to pay for it, and we want the performance bond. Or we could rescind the lots as leverage ourselves to make sure that gets done for ourselves. So I'd be interested in what the board members think, what should have happened before, and then what we think we could do, and just talk about it generally without making a final decision, maybe waiting a few weeks to make a final decision, but I'd be interested in what people think.
And talk about it right now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Jack?
I just had one question for Tom. The walk-away concept within your letter report today was significant and moving. And I'm wondering if you can, what is a worst-case scenario when that happens? How much would be put upon cost on the homeowners within Amherst Hills if that walk-away scenario were to happen?
Sure, and I think you've got $288,000, and then however many lots that haven't been released that still exist, but as I understand, there's not even enough roadway to finish them, so it's completing that roadway by the cul-de-sac, so maybe a few $100,000, I don't know, it's probably better for the punch list. But that's the cost to bring the roads, because if the $288,000 covers the top coat, then we're really just talking about getting them into a place where they can be top coated, and that is what would be borne by the homeowners. So, whatever that number turns, a few $100,000.
It to be determined. I mean, we don't really know. Tofino threw out a number much lower.
Of course.
Then you just throw out a number, but right, there's an amount. Just on Janet's point, we have to remember there's two different issues that are going on here. There was a performance agreement done in 2017 that sort of has run out, but that wasn't what we voted on in May. It was just the releasing of lots, which at that time, even if we had more closely examined the performance agreement, it wasn't in non-compliance yet because it was May 1st, and there were still 2 months before. So if it had been, then maybe the answer was, oh, no, that work will be done by then, and we probably would have been like, oh, okay, and still release the lots, because if nothing else, you're getting closer to that 90%, so that because we all knew, I mean, it was, they want a top coat. Everyone wants their neighborhood finished. So I'm just saying, just some hindsight as I've looked through this is, there wouldn't have been a bell ringing yet that it was in non-compliance, because it wasn't in non-compliance. So I think I saw Maria first, and then.
I think I liked Chris's point about making decisions based on facts, and I feel like we're in this conundrum because there were so many gray areas and lack of facts. The reason why the roads are in the condition they're in is because there wasn't a clear communication about who maintains this unfinished road until the 90%, and so that's why we're here. And so that's beyond our purview. We're not in that sort of contractual who is responsible for that. That's beyond our scope. But I do think that getting more facts, for example, right, the work that needs to be done to increase the performance bond can then really inform us as to how to move forward with either the leverage we need, or maybe we don't know. Tofino might come back and say, I'll do good with this group and I'll agree to that. So I feel it would be a little, for myself, I would feel it's a little premature to do something drastic like rescind or something that's punitive at this point when we don't know actions that other people or other groups would be taking.
I think Janet was next.
So I'm not doing this to browbeat anybody, but so if you knew before you released the lots that the road was failing and a top coat wouldn't have worked, would you have said, hey, if Jason had come, Mr. Skeels had come and said, this, parts of this road have failed, it's going to require more stuff. It seems like at that point you could have it seems logical to say, oh, let's increase the performance bond, and that kind of thing. So I'm not saying let's do action now, but I'm just wondering what people are thinking in terms of, how, I don't want to say a mistake was made, because that always sounds sort of
No,
stupid, but.
I think again, the two issues, it might have, if we knew more now, I think we would have said, oh, the performance bond is about to run out, and in standard construction practice, it needs to be updated either with dollars or a realistic finish date. But I don't want to get into whether, I don't know what we would have done about the lots. Yeah, and I don't know if anyone else has any other thoughts, Jack?
I'm just wondering if there's some alternatives, short-term besides rescinding in terms of bridging this over so he doesn't behave in a bad way with that walk-away scenario. Is there some bridging thing other than rescinding the lots? A notice to the deed, something, just so sellers know what's going on and no one's blindsided, sort of thing.
A suggestion to that
Oh,
effect.
great.
Perhaps, I don't know whether it's I don't know quite how we do this, but if we could put a temporary hold on building permit issuance until that November date when we're going to have this meeting, when we'll reconvene and reconsider this issue, if we could tonight say that building permits for those lots are suspended until November, whatever what date is.
20th.
And that would prohibit, it would seem to me to prohibit Tofino from selling those lots in good faith
Yeah.
until that point. And then we would retain leverage, such as it is, until such time as we have more facts, as you're suggesting we need, and I can't dispute that. So that may be a temporary solution.
Chris, could we do that? Do a temporary hold on building permits until the 20th when we meet again?
I think you could do that.
How does that sit with people? Jack?
How does the potential buyer suss that out, other than the dishonest disclosure agreement by the owner?
I don't know how the potential buyer figures that out, but if we put the onus on Mr. Parker by informing him tomorrow that this has been decided by the planning board, then it is his responsibility to not engage in fraud by selling lots that cannot be built on.
I agree with that. So could he be informed if we did this, Chris? Could that go out tomorrow in a letter, whatever? Janet?
Could you talk more about the notice to the deed, like the effect of that and how you do that?
Oh, well, I think a notice doesn't really have any teeth to it, but it's just, it's someone to do a deed research on the lots, and there would be this notice attached to it. It would be another flag.
Chris?
I think,
Yeah,
I know that we can put a notice in the registry if we rescind the release of the lots. And in fact, Joel Bard has offered to help draft such a notice. I'm not sure if we can do the same for a planning board recommendation or request to the building commissioner about building permits. I don't know what that mechanism would be.
But we could do a temporary hold
could do a
on building
temporary
permits
request,
till the
yeah.
20th
Mhm,
and keep the other things in motion and see
Yep.
where we're at the 20th. I agree with Michael that just by doing that and informing him, I mean, others may disagree here, but we have he's in charge of many subdivisions around town, and we don't believe that he's going out of his way to, what was the word you used? Bad? But this sort of puts a legal obligation on his, reputation, and legally, he knows that he couldn't sell a lot that can't be built on.
Madam Chair, I guess
Yes,
2 quick points. First, to the recordation of some notice. I don't see any reason why you couldn't record something, even if it's just like a notice of recommendation by the planning board to the non-issuance of building permits, because practically anybody that's paying attention to the title is going to take a look, see that in the record, and say, wait a second, what actually is going on here? Probably come to town hall practically and have a conversation with the building department before they were to acquire any lot. So I don't know, what, it's not like, it's not a rescission, it doesn't have that sort of power, but it does put the world on notice, which will probably have the same practical effect in look to do everything that the board is looking to do.
Chris?
A question for Mr. Reedy. Would we need to put a notice on each lot separately? Or
I think
would
you could
we
just do the same thing that you did for the release, is just, lots. And I think we want to exclude the 4 that have gone to Mr. Berkhume. And so in the email that I sent you, Chris, the ones that Tofino still owns that were released, 1, 2, 5, 6, 7, 8, 29, 39, and 41, you would just say that those are the lots affected by this notice. And I think it's that simple. I think it's $75 recording fee, and you at least muddy the title enough to make people question it.
Okay, just one thing popped in my head. On lot 29, wasn't that one that was already released, and there was something about they couldn't find the paperwork, so as like a safety thing, they had us do 29 again? I'm just wondering if 29 should still be in this in case, like, it was already released
There was
before.
no, Tofino had no record of the release. We had a record of the
Yeah.
release, but Tofino didn't have a record of the release.
But does that make it
Nobody
legal?
could find a copy of it, and it wasn't recorded at the registry. So
It was or it was not?
it's not recorded at the
That means-
registry. Otherwise, we could have gotten a copy of it.
So I'm not legal, so is it okay if we include 29 in this, or is
I think
that
it
on?
is.
Okay. Thank you. And we would go through this effort even if it's a temporary? Okay. How does that sit with the board right now? Any comments or concerns?
Are we talking about notice
Putting
or
a-
just the
Putting a temporary hold on all building permits until the 20th, and Tofino being informed, and something being scribbled up legally that gets attached to the title?
Yeah, I mean, I think
deed?
it's just recording it in the registry of deeds, so when anybody does a title search for, let's say, Lot 5, they're going to look and they're going to say, wait, Lot 5 has this notice of recommendation attached
There's
to
a
it.
flag.
That's
Okay.
practically all we can do, I think.
And that's what we would do at this point until we meet on the 20th, when we're expecting other things to have been grilled out, decided, created. Okay. Does that sound good? Should I have public comment? Yeah. So, like now, you think is?
It's up to you. It's not a public hearing, so it's
Yeah, that's
completely
why I
up
was
to the
asking
chair
you, but I
whether
know
you
there
would
were-
like to have public comment, but there are a lot of people who came tonight.
Yeah,
so.
that's what I'm gonna, is that, all right. So, you've all been waiting patiently, and I know this is very, upsetting and emotional and all that. But if anyone would like to come forward and offer us any additional information that would be helpful to us, or any suggestions that should be like looked into, or other work that needs to be done before the 20th, that would be helpful. So if I could have a show of hands just to get a feeling of how many people. I see 1 in the way back, 2, okay, and I think I saw a 3rd one. Now I see a 4th. I feel like, do I have, all right, so 1, so we'll start with the woman in the back is first, and then I saw 2, and then the man in the red shirt, 3, and then there was a blue shirt over there. If that would be 4, and then I'll ask again after those 4 people. Thank you. So come on forward and just say your name and where you live, and get the nod from the minute takers, and then please start.
Alexandra Mayu, that's M-E-L-I-O-U. I'm at 73 Linden Ridge Road. Okay, so I would just like to bring up 4 points. It is not necessarily things that you haven't heard, but things that I would like to emphasize. Ted Parker has been the one approving the building of sheds in our yards. building plans. He himself told me a few years ago that he rejected a plan from Brookhume because he didn't want this to be built in our neighborhood. He's been the one mowing our lawns and fixing the roads so far. Ted has been the homeowners association. There has been no other homeowner association. He's been holding that function. This is supported by the comments that you heard from the town engineer. He's the one who has been doing all the work so far and has never brought up any responsibilities from any other homeowner association so far, other than this early September. I don't think that any one of us in the town, and I hope you do as well, none of us believe that it's a coincidence that these potholes remained the way they were for more than a year, and suddenly 2 days before your site visit, he rushed to fill them in. I think this is a clear indication that he recognizes that you have oversight over his work in the subdivision, and he recognizes that you have this leverage because he knew that this was going to be discussed today. Third point, we've all been operating in good faith so far, and we heard Ted in good faith also in early September. But his actions this past year make me think, and I would like to encourage you as well, to not just rely on his good faith anymore. I think that both the rushed fixing of the potholes, the not getting back to us about the situation of the road, and suddenly wanted to push on us this extreme cost of constructing the road itself, all of a sudden that none of us had heard of before, living so many years in the neighborhood, these are indications that this good faith is gone. And that makes me believe that just raising this cost estimate in the three-party agreement will not be enough to compel him to act. I do believe that holding extra leverage on him, like rescinding the lots, is something that is necessary. The final point that I would like to make is that the town has oversight over the construction of subdivisions. We're not asking you here to intervene and take sides on a private matter. We're asking you to exercise the oversight that you have the responsibility to exercise. If you abdicate this responsibility, you will be doing so at the expense of your town residents and at the benefit of an out-of-state developer. And I think this is not right. Thank you for your time.
Hi, Blake Spirko, 53 Concord Way. I also just had a couple quick points. One, again, just reiterating that they actually verbally told us when we were buying the lots that they would prep them in a way that they would then be able to present to the town, and the town would be acceptable for taking them over. And that now they're changing their plans on that, and that is what's partly upsetting, saying that they want us to help fix the roads. And that's not what they told, I think, most of the people who bought lots there. And two, I think as a developer, he knew the base coat can only last so many years. For what I'm hearing tonight from the town engineer, we know the base coats can only last for so many years. It's way over that time period. The town engineer has said they're not going to last. And now that they're failing, he's going to say, let's put the money on the people of the neighborhood. When he knew that, we didn't know that. That seems disingenuous to me. That's it.
I think yeah.
Hello, I'm Brian Keaton at 107 Linden Ridge Road, and I'm having difficulty getting my mind around this idea that we are partially responsible. One of the reasons is, well, as I just said, we were never told about it. We were led to believe that it would be completed as part of the lot price that we paid. But the concept that he may be going towards where we share the cost, he's been selling sites continuously since we bought our house. Trucks have gone on the road to benefit him, not to benefit us. He's sold sites all the way through. There have probably been about 5 or 6 new houses built since we moved in. None of the benefit of that came to us. or none of it was put aside, or it doesn't seem to have been put aside to fix the roads, he gets the benefit, and then he turns around and says, well, why don't you pay the cost? Another 5 lots go, he gets the benefit, why don't you pay the cost? It just doesn't seem to be, that doesn't seem reasonable. Starting off with, we were told that we may not have read all the details, but he clearly said to so many of us that there has to be credibility. He would do everything and then turn it over to the town. And now he's saying, well, you share the cost basically at his discretion, because we're not involved in any of these discussions since there is no, there's just no association. Thank you.
I think there was a man in, yeah. And then you're next.
Hello.
Hello.
My name's Ed Ryan. I live at 32 Hawthorne Road, and I appreciate the comments of the attorneys and Jim and everybody else. My comment is very brief. I just appreciate the time and attention that this board has given us at the last meeting as well as this one. I know you might prefer to be someplace else right now. But my comment concerns are the reason why, one of the reasons why, our primary concern is the time is of the essence for us. And you guys went over that, we discussed that at the last hearing. But, as I see it, my wife and I we moved here in 2016, and Cole Construction built our home. And they did a great job. And we had regular dealings with Ted Parker, and they were good. What's going on now, I think, is wrong. And the way I see it, and I haven't talked to Ted about it, but, Tofino is the umbrella over, they own the land, and Cole Construction builds the houses. And that's how it came when we first moved up here. So we bought our lot from Tofino, and then Cole built our house, and it's a great house. We love our house. But things have changed with Tofino. Doug Cole passed away in September, I think, of 2010. And now, Tofino is selling all these lots. And Cole Construction isn't really building a lot of houses as far as I could tell. I looked at the inspection building permit reports issued by the inspection division or whatever, and it looks like the last time they were given a permit to build a single-family house was in May of 2017. So I think our concern is, we talk about them walking away, but it seems to me that if I'm Benedict Cole and I'm 80, late 80s or 90s or whatever I am, and my son is gone, maybe I want to wind things down. That's just what it appears to me. So it's not, I don't know, it's all ill will, but it seems to me that things are winding down, and I think our concern is that we're going to be left holding the bag, really. So, I appreciate your attention.
Thank you. Sarah. And as this gentleman comes up, is there anyone else who's going to want to speak after this? So I see 3 more hands. 1, 2, 3.
My name is Angelo Mazzocco, 57 Linden Ridge Road. I've dealt with Ted Parker directly. He built my house. I have a lot of information I could divulge, but I'm not going to. But one thing I've learned about Ted Parker, he's not going to do anything unless he's legally forced to do so. Now, the other issue, I've done a little bit of research, and I've been told that when a developer undertakes the development of a subdivision, that developer enters in some kind of contractual agreement with the town or city, as the case may be. So I'm assuming that when Tofino Associates began the construction or the development of Amherst Hills, he must have entered in some kind of an agreement. Now, I know that the release of the lots was done in good faith, as the engineer was saying before. And I can understand that because I know how Ted Parker maneuvers. However, I think that the board has the duty, the moral duty, to defend a community such as Amherst Hills, which by now I think is about 80% or 90% developed, and simply cannot leave us hanging there with no protection. Thank you.
Thank you. No, you're good. Okay.
Thank you. 82 Linden Ridge, Uli Polishowski, Holeschow, So,
Is the green light on? And speak into the
yes.
mic. Thanks. Sorry.
So we were here 2 weeks ago, right? And 2 weeks ago we had the same discussion. There were some people, I think you made a comment that talking about everything, we need more information. 2 weeks later, we have a lot more information. Again, we want to defer another 3 weeks. And I'm also a little taken aback by the fact that Ms. Chow seems to believe that it's not any of your business really to get involved with the builder and the homeowners. I think that is not right. I mean, you do have responsibility. I mean, I've never heard about a building subdivision where the homeowners are supposed to construct a road. I mean, that doesn't happen. And the argument that's being made is preposterous, really. And my concern is that they're going out of business, they're trying to get rid of the lots, and then they will say, bye-bye, and we will be mired in litigation, and it's just a very bad situation. So I don't think if you rescind the lots, if you come to the conclusion that the lots need to be released again, then you can release them again. Are you afraid of rescinding the lots? What is your concern about it? Why don't you want to take that step? I mean, I don't understand your concern, because if you in 3 weeks from now or 4 weeks from now, we are wrong and Tofino is right, that you can release the lots again. I just don't understand what's your concern about not doing it.
At this point, we're still collecting information and getting guidance from the town as a volunteer planning board.
But you did collect the last 2 weeks, you did collect information already. You have a lot more information. The town engineer was here, I mean, okay.
I think we made a list of things that we're still waiting on, and we hope that there will be news on those, and we will have been informed and guided by that time. I'm sorry you have to wait longer.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, please. And is there anyone else after this gentleman who would like to speak? Is there a hand? I don't think so. I think we're all good. Okay.
Hi.
Thank you. So if you can give your name and address.
Oh, sure. I'm Brian Scully, 22 Hawthorne Road in Amherst. First, I just want to say I think you guys have zeroed in on a great compromise tonight of how to keep your leverage on Tofino and Ted Parker. I think that's a great idea. And I wanted to talk about just one quick thing and thank every one of you, and that's a public safety thing. If you guys hadn't gone out, and he and Parker hadn't known you were going out to look at the problems on our road, I don't think he would have fixed the potholes. And I don't blame the DPW for saying they can't plow the snow for us because of the damage to their plows or their drivers. They're 100% right. But if you look around, you see a lot of the people you're looking at here are like me, they're old or they're retired. Well, you know, my wife has type 1 diabetes. I mean, it's a tremendous, I don't know if any of you have it or not, but she has ups and downs all the time, you know, and I keep a glucose pen in my nightstand in case it goes too low. And I've never had to do it, but I know that someday I may need to call an ambulance for her. If our roads aren't plowed during the winter, if that had happened, if that had, you know, if your visit hadn't taken place, there's a very good chance we wouldn't have gotten plowed, and then ambulances might not have gotten through, or a fire truck. I've needed an ambulance myself once. It's a scary thing, but you know it's there, and you know that someone's coming to help. And left to his own devices, and without your visit, I don't think Parker would have done anything. It would have been us out there shoveling gravel into the damn thing and trying to fix it ourselves. Well, because you do what you do for the people you love. And again, it's an older community out there. There's some young kids. I've got a 12-year-old. But everybody has something. And the right to being protected from the fire by the fire department and the police department, I wouldn't blame them if they couldn't come out, because if you can't get out, you can't get out. You fixed that for us just by coming out. So you matter, and I think you've, like I said, zeroed in on a really good compromise to hold, you know, some leverage on him and just make him do what he said he'd do. That's all we want, no more. Thanks for doing it.
Thank you. So I think we're done with public comment. Jack?
I was just curious for Mr. Alexis or Tom, where he proposed the homeowners pay for a portion of the road. Was that in conversation, or would he put that in writing, or?
I jumped up here. It's Jim Master. Because, just so you know, and this is in one of the documents that I sent you, dated, I think it was October 3rd, I gave you a timeline of what happened. To directly answer your question, it was only on September 6th at a community meeting that we called and asked him to come to discuss the state of the road, okay? So it was only on that date, September 6th, not even 2 months ago, that he looked at us and said, it's our position that you're responsible to repair the bottom layer of the road, and after you replace the bottom layer of the road, we will place the top coat on the road, right? And I am just telling you, we had never heard that before, and had never taken that position. I moved in 2005, okay, so I had a good relationship with Mr. Parker, okay? And I forget was one of my neighbors who said that he had done things in the past that were fine. Yes, he did. Something changed, okay? And we're all sad that Mr. Cole passed away. He was a good guy, all right? It's awful, all right? But to lead up to September 6th, in December, I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but in December, Mr. Mooring told me, Guilford Mooring, the DPW superintendent, I ran into him in a public meeting. He said, Jim, your roads are awful. I'm not plowing anymore, and that road needs to be reconstructed. And I said, well, I'll call Ted. I called him the next day, and I said to him, Ted, I'm just telling you, you better square this up with the town. And he said, hey, I talk to him every year. I said, I know you do. You better call him and square this up, because Guilford's not happy. And I said to him, like, straight up, I said, look, Ted, do yourself a favor. Just do the potholes. Do the potholes. It'll get everyone off your back and off my back. No one's really on my back. But I was like, just fill the potholes. Just do this so people can plow. And do it. And then there was like radio silence. Every once in a while we spoke. He was really holding me off. I'm a lawyer. I know when people are trying not to talk. Okay? And getting to your point, I want to make this point as it came up. May 1st, you released the lots. And then 4 lots are sold, okay, to Burke Hume Builders for $560,000, okay? And those lots, the lots released from May 1st, the sales were in June, July, and August, okay? So Tofino realized $560,000 in that time period. Last one was sold by the deed. I looked at it myself. August 2nd, $140,000. August 2nd, and then September 6th, he says to us, you've got to pay to fix the bottom coat of the road. After he puts $560,000 in his pocket, this actually goes to one of the common humor in this job. We're not getting that money. I don't even want that money. We just want a road that's fixed. And we're not we don't work for him. We're not going to fix a road and then he gets to sell the lots. And I can tell you, getting back to your question, sorry to go on so long, but it was only on September 6th, after he had controlled the subdivision. I moved in with my family in 2005. He had controlled the subdivision since 2005, filled every pothole, cut all the grass, and fixed the roads. And then, 2 months ago, after putting 560 grand in his pocket, he said, you're responsible for fixing the roads. And we're like, oh, really? Then it took us a little while to figure out what to do, come to you, because we thought that you, and it is true, you oversee how subdivisions are built in this town, okay? And we have a covenant, okay, that I think he's ignoring. The road has, and everyone cut him a break, which was okay, there was recession. There was no performance bond in 2003, and it says, when you get a chance to read it, in consideration of the town of Amherst Planning Board not having a performance bond, Tofino covets for the following. 1, we will not release a lot until the work is done on the ground. So there was no money from him up front, okay? All he had to do was do the work. Now, he did the work, okay? To give him credit, he did the work. But now the work is deteriorating by the passage of time. Is that on us? I don't think so. He bought the 70 lots for $425,000. That's such a deal. It's good for him, out of bankruptcy. Okay? He's made his money back hundredfold, literally. Okay? So now, here we are. Okay, thanks for asking this question.
Thanks, Jack.
I'm just not going to stop. All right, so here we are, and there's a covenant that's been ignored, and then all of a sudden this performance bond, three-party agreement, that we all think tries to guarantee performance, is for only the top coat, because he's very tricky with what he says. I know how that was done. I was living. He paid a base coat of Linden Ridge and Concord, and he basically said, well, let's just guarantee the top coat of this. Okay? And everyone's doing things halfway. Okay? We're here. He's not. We need help. He doesn't. Okay? And I think your compromise is good, but I would really like you to tell me and vote on this and say, we're going to increase the security, because everyone knows $288,000 isn't enough. We're going to increase security, and then we're going to get the number from Jason, and he can square it up with Ted, figure out what the real number is. I'm not an engineer, I'm not going to come up with that. But I think we need security on this, because what if tomorrow he gets the notice from Ms. Brestrup, okay, and says, you know what, we're out of here. We can't sell a lot, we can't do a building lot, we're out of it, and all we have is the 288. Man, this is my neighbors are going to give me a hard time for this. This is the last thing I'll say, okay? Because I said that about 10 times. You know, in Ms. Brestrup's email, which is fine, she has her opinions, you know, Mr. Parker says, well, this is going to cost between $50,000 and $100,000 to fix. And then he divides it in segments, $1,400, and he seems like Mr. Reasonable. Oh, well, I'll chip in. Go team, we'll all chip in $1,400 and do this. I don't know, I can tell from the engineer's body language, you can ask him yourself, to mill up half of Hawthorne Way is much, much more expensive than $100,000. Half of Hawthorne Way needs to be dug up or milled down, I don't know how to do that, and replaced, and regraded, and then laid, okay? A significant portion of Linden Ridge has to be milled down or dug up and paved, okay? Since when are these people a construction company? Okay? And this is a unique situation. The passage of time did this, okay? But the passage of time, I mean, and I'm not trying to say bad things about the town. We don't have building inspectors. We don't have a planning department. We don't have a planning department, okay? We rely, and citizens rely on, and you do a good job volunteering for this, okay? But the responsibility here is to say, hey, what's going on here? Who's going to be hurt? Are these people going to be helped? And how do we build a subdivision in Amherst? And I really do think that this could set a bad precedent. A half-built road with language that's tricky, okay? And good people who aren't lawyers like me, right, getting caught. So I'd like to see some security. And this is real. This isn't hypothetical, okay? This isn't like, well, we can't. This is real. So thank you very much. I appreciate your time. Let me just go with that and sit down.
Chris?
So if you decide to have a vote on recommending that the building commission not issue any building permits for these lots, I wonder if Mr. Reedy could potentially help you with a motion on that, because I wasn't prepared.
And put a temporary hold on them
A temporary
until
hold
November
until
20th.
November 20th, yep.
So is the board ready for that, for a motion? Does anyone, Janet?
Are we asking the building inspector not to issue, or are we telling him not to?
You don't really have power over the building commissioner. I think you can make a strong recommendation that he not issue building permits. And in my conversations with him, he is willing to honor that recommendation.
Do you have, if there's no other questions, do I hear a motion and you can plead for help from Ms. Bestrup or Mr. Reedy?
I'll move that we request the building inspector to refuse, to not issue any building permits or sewer connection permits, or what was the other, waste connection, water connection permits, for lots. The lots affected.
There you go.
Thank you. Until such time as this body has the opportunity to make a fuller determination as to the positions it may take relative to the rescinding of these lots.
And updating the performance
Perfect.
agreement.
And updating the performance agreement based on an estimate from the town engineer.
Or a third-party estimator.
No.
And/or.
I don't want to vote for, I don't want to ask for a third-party estimate. I want the town engineer to make his recommendation, and then it can be disputed by Tofino if Tofino wishes to dispute it.
Okay.
Do you want to list the lots specifically, or do you want me to list them?
We had the,
You
what
have-
did you say, David?
I just said lots affected.
Lots affected, but.
Lots affected,
This pile somewhere.
and referenced in the email from Tom Reedy to Chris Brestrup, October 30th.
Yeah, well, what do we say? The lots numbers 1, 2, 5, 6, 7, 8, 29, 39, and 41.
Are we including the four that have, no, we can't, right.
Including the
So
four that have
the
been-
9
That
lots.
does not include the 4 lots that have already been sold.
Great.
And we further, and further that the notice be placed, notice be
Yeah.
recorded.
Mr. Reedy, this is.
This gentleman lives on 29.
That's even weirder.
Well, why,
Hold that thought.
why is 29
Does
on
he,
our
is he
list?
talking about address 29?
Right, I think,
Yeah,
Might be
is
talking
that-
about,
I think we'd have to look at the, because the lot number might not be the mailing
That's what I'm
address.
wondering.
29 is circled.
Right, because the lot numbers are different than the address numbers.
Yeah.
Because a bunch of you could live on, a few of you could live on 29s. Shh, shh. Yeah, okay.
In my original motions, I said that, and I took out the 4. So, and they're the same as Mr. Reed. Is that what we-
Yeah, Mr. Burtwissel's reading from Mr. Reedy's letter, so it should be correct. But that's the confusion, that there's number houses and number lots, but, so we're good. Did you get that motion? Sorry.
Ask Mr. Reedy if that was appropriate language,
Yeah, I
as
think
far
that's
as
perfect.
he's
And
concerned.
did we get the last part about, and the note going in the deeds? The,
Notice of
Filing in
this
the
shall be
registry of deeds,
recorded.
filing a
Filing it.
notice in the registry of deeds.
and filing for, okay, for those lots?
Yes.
Did we,
Mention the date of November 20th, or do you not want to do that? You could mention another date. You could say end of the year or something.
I said, until such time as this body determined a more permanent solution.
yes.
But we could, if you prefer November, or just
I think that's
20th.
probably better to do it the way you're,
Okay.
Doing
So
it.
put in November,
no, I think just
Oh,
until
do-
this body.
that's what I
Because then,
thought, okay.
on the 20th, if you do whatever you do, then you just we'll file a release with the registry releasing that notice that you had put on to kind of close that loop.
you never know. Don't tell them that. So, second, any discussion on the motion? Okay, a vote, all in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, unanimous.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Nice, thank you for always helping with the site visits and the motions. Yeah, oh, is that why he always gets to do them? I'm just so thankful, I'm like, please don't make me do it.
You don't have to do that.
But I don't want to beg. Don't make me beg on camera, you know that's terrible.
Excuse me, planning board members, hello.
Yes, there was,
Planning board members, may I get your attention?
yes.
We still have an A&R to deal with,
She just said,
so
excuse me, if you could leave the room and we still have a meeting to finish, believe it or not, but if you could go out into the hall, thank you so much. So Chris, did you just say we have an A&R?
this is an A&R that we had hoped we could bring to you 2 weeks ago, but we couldn't, so I'm going to bring it to you tonight. I think it's pretty simple,
So
so
you're begging us to
5
stay and
minutes.
do it?
Yes, can you do it, please?
Okay.
All right.
Oh, I probably do need my glasses then. Thank you, everyone. Okay, so is this under old business or new business? It's new?
This is under A&R. We did
Oh,
manage
there
to
we go.
sneak in A&R on the agenda,
Did. I
because we knew
probably
this
should
was
go
going to come up. So
Okay.
Ms. Field Sadler is coming by with a map showing where this property is located. It's located off Strong Street. There's a sort of it's not really a cul-de-sac, it's a loop road. It's called Maplewood Circle. So it's in the sort of central part of town, north of the downtown area. And what this person wants to do is, she'd like to improve her driveway, and her driveway is partially on her neighbor's property. So she is asking her neighbor to sell her a little wedge of land, not amounting to very much at all, and you'll see it when Ms. Field Sadler brings around this map. And so she wants to buy the wedge and then fix the driveway and then be done with it for the winter.
Is the shed is only 10 feet away from the new property line? Is that all right?
Yes. This is a 10-foot-high shed and a
It's off
shed.
of Strong Street?
It's off of Strong Street. Look at the colored map, and you'll see where it's located with regard to Strong Street. And the shed is set back a distance equal to its height because it's an accessory structure. So even though the setback for a bigger building in this neighborhood would be more than that, since this is an accessory structure, it just has to be set back a distance equal to its height.
Is it still a gravel driveway? It says,
She wants to have it paved, so that may be the impetus. She wants to do this before the asphalt plants close, and so she wants to purchase this little sliver and have the driveway paved before the winter.
Normally, can you pave a driveway up to the property line? Just wondering.
Yes, there are no setbacks for driveways.
So it really is a very teeny tiny piece that she's trying to retain.
Got no problem with that.
I got no problem with this.
If you authorize Ms. Gray Mullen to sign it, we would be
We good?
happy to take care of that.
Here, this goes with it.
Okay, so we can adjourn. So there was no old business, new business, and we can adjourn. Great. Do I hear a motion? Are we adjourning?
Yes, moved, so moved.
Moved, voted, aye, and thank you, Amherst Media.